Let's talk about something most people won't touch. Not because it's too edgy, not because it's taboo, but because it cuts too close to the truth. A truth that makes people uncomfortable, that exposes the game, a truth that forces us to confront the cost of success, the cost of beauty, the cost of being wanted but not seen. So here it is. This video will be broken up into multiple sections. Let's get into it. Why do successful men, men with options, men with money, status, leverage, pay for intimacy? Why do they skip the apps, the dinners, the long walks, the late night texts, the chase? Why do they bypass the performance and go direct? It's not desperation. It's not addiction. It's not because they can't get a woman. That's the lazy answer. That's the surface level take. The truth is sharper, more uncomfortable, more revealing, because once a man becomes successful, truly successful, the rules change. The game changes, the cost changes, and connection, that becomes the most expensive thing. Not in dollars, in bandwidth, in peace, in risk. Let me break it down. Let's start with visibility. Section 1, the visibility trap. Success doesn't just open doors, it paints a target. When you're unknown, you're free. You move in silence. You speak without consequence. You connect without suspicion. But once you're visible, you're watched. You're judged. You're monetized. You're dissected. You're a brand now. Every word becomes a quote. Every gesture, a signal. Every relationship becomes a liability, a headline, a risk. And that's the part no one tells you. Success isn't just access, it's exposure. And exposure changes everything. It changes how people see you. Because when people see you as valuable, they stop seeing you as human. They see leverage. They see opportunity. They see a way to climb. And that's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition. Ask any man who's made it. Ask any woman at the top. They'll tell you the same thing. Trust gets expensive. The higher you go, the harder it is to trust because everyone wants something and very few want you. So what do? You build walls. You filter harder. You test more. You isolate. But even that gets exhausting because now you're screening. You're not just living. You're managing optics. And that's not intimacy. That's security. That's survival. So some men opt out, not because they're broken, but because they're awake. They see the game, they see the cost, and they choose clarity. They choose control. They choose peace over performance. And yes, sometimes that means paying for it, not because they're weak, but because they're done. Done with the noise, done with the theater, done with being a mirror for other people's projections. They want something real, or at least honest. Section 2, the paradox of value. Let's go deeper. Let's talk about the paradox. The more valuable you become, the less accessible you are. Not because you're arrogant, but because people project. They assume, they fantasize, they state, they strategize, they calculate, and that creates distance. That creates distortion. Because now, every interaction is filtered through expectation, through performance, through agenda, through imagined ROI. And that's not connection. That's a theater. So what do high value people do? They retreat, they isolate, they curate, they protect their peace because they're tired of being mirrors, tired of being symbols. They want to be seen, not as a brand, not as a wallet, not as a trophy, but as a person. And that's rare. So when they find it, they protect it. And when they can't, they pay for the closest thing, not because they're shallow, but because they're starving, starving for honesty, starving for simplicity, starving for a moment that isn't loaded. And sometimes that moment comes with a price tag, not because it's fake, but because it's clean, because it's clear, because it's not pretending. And in a world of performance, that's priceless. That's peace. That's control. That's sanity. Section 3, the emotional cost of dating. Let's talk about dating, not the fantasy, the reality. Dating today is a performance economy. You're not just showing up, you're selling your looks, your lifestyle, your story, your brand. And the more successful you are, the more you perform, you entertain, you impress, you provide, you curate. And that pressure, it's relentless, it's exhausting, it's not connection, it's content. So some men opt out, not because they're weak, but because they're tired, tired of being tested, tired of being a prize to be won and taxed, tired of being a resource, not a person. So they choose simplicity, they choose clarity, they choose control. And yes, sometimes that means paying. Because here's the truth, nothing is free, not in dating, not in love, not in life. There's always a cost. The only question is, how do you want to pay it? With time, with energy, with money, with your peace. Successful men, they've already paid the price elsewhere. They've sacrificed, they've built, they've bled. So when it comes to intimacy, they're done negotiating, they're done performing, they're done chasing. They want peace, they want clarity, they want control. Section 4, the transactional escape. Now, let's talk about the transaction. Let's talk about escorts. Let's talk about clarity. Because this isn't about sex, it's about simplicity, it's about control, it's about bandwidth, it's about peace. You see, an escort doesn't pretend. She doesn't perform romance. She doesn't test. She doesn't calculate. She delivers. And for a man who's tired of theater, that's not scandal. That's answer. That's solution. Because the dating market, it's bloated. It's broken. It's loaded with expectation, ambiguity, and emotional labor. And for a man who's already built his empire, who's already proven his worth, that's not appealing. That's exhausting. That's inefficient. That's risk. So he opts out. He pays for clarity. Not because he's broken, but because he's strategic. Because he values his time, his peace, his energy. And before you judge, ask yourself, is that really so different from what dating is? Dinner dates, gifts, vacations, all in pursuit of intimacy, all with the hope that it'll lead somewhere. But for the man who's already played the game, who's already won, he's not chasing anymore. He's not performing. He's not negotiating. He's reclaiming. He's simplifying. He's choosing peace. Section 5, the myth of romance. Let's talk about romance. Let's talk about the myth. Because culture sells us a fantasy, the fantasy of love without cost, of connection without calculation, of intimacy without risk. But that's not how the world works. That's not how people work. That's not how value works. Romance is beautiful, but it's not free. It's built on bandwidth, trust, and emotional labor. And for high value men, that labor gets expensive because they're not just dating, they're managing optics, they're managing risk, they're managing legacy, and that changes the equation. That changes the game. So they opt out, not because they hate romance, but because they've outgrown the fantasy. They've seen behind the curtain, they've read the fine print, and they choose clarity over illusion. Section 6, the legacy equation. Let's talk about legacy. Let's talk about risk, because for high value men, intimacy isn't casual. It's strategic. It's reputational. It's potentially catastrophic. A bad relationship isn't just heartbreak. It's headlines. It's lawsuits. It's leverage. It's exposure. It's vulnerability. So the calculus changes. The stakes get higher, and the margin for error that gets razor thin. So what do? They protect their peace. They protect their brand. They protect their bandwidth because they've built something worth defending. And they're not going to risk it for ambiguity, for performance, for manipulation, for emotional volatility. They want clarity. They want control. They want quiet. And yes, sometimes that means paying for it, not because they're broken, but because they're builders. And builders protect what they've built. Section 7, the female mirror. Let's flip the lens. Let's talk about women. because this isn't a one-sided equation. High value women, the truly beautiful, the rare, they face the same isolation, the same distortion. They're admired, they're desired, but they're not seen. They're approached with strategy, with projection, with performance. And over time, that wears on you because you stop being a person. You become a mirror for other people's fantasies, a mirror for their insecurities, their ambitions, their fears. And that's lonely. That's exhausting. That's dehumanizing. So what happens? They retreat, they filter, they isolate, they crave authenticity, they crave simplicity, they crave a moment that isn't loaded. Hard times are here. Jobs are disappearing fast. And if you lose yours, you could be homeless in a few months or even a few weeks. But it doesn't have to be that way. Check out Angry's Creator Academy and learn how to build your own online business using YouTube to grow it. And get the free creator blueprint when you sign up. The link's in description below. Go check it out now. And sometimes that moment has to be bought. Not because it's fake, but because it's clean, because it's not pretending, because it's not performing. And in a world of theater, that's rare. That's peace. That's sanity. That's clarity. So the rich and the beautiful, they orbit, not because they're shallow, but because they understand. They understand the cost of being seen as valuable. They speak the same language, they carry the same weight, and they both crave the same thing: honesty. Section 8, the collapse of courtship. Let's talk about courtship. Let's talk about the collapse. Because the old model, it's broken. The slow dance, the romance, the pursuit, it's been replaced by performance, by content, by strategy, dating apps, social media, filters, metrics. It's not connection, it's conversion, it's optimization, and that changes the game. That changes the incentives. That changes the psychology of intimacy. Because now everyone's selling, everyone's curating, everyone's performing, everyone's calculating ROI. And that's not love. That's leverage. That's not intimacy. That's influence. So what do high value men do? They opt out. They don't want to be content. They don't want to be currency. They want peace. They want clarity. They want something that isn't a pitch. And if that means stepping outside the model, so be it, because the model is broken, it's bloated, it's inefficient, it's exhausting. And for men who have already played and won, they're not interested in another game. They're interested in quiet, in control, in simplicity. And sometimes that means paying for it, not because they're weak, but because they're awake. Section 9, the ethics of opting out. Let's talk about judgment. Let's talk about ethics, because when men opt out, people react. They shame, they mock, they moralize, they project. But here's the question: who benefits from that judgment? Who profits from keeping men in the game? Who profits from their bandwidth, their energy, their attention? Because opting out, that's a threat. It's a threat to the system, to the incentives, to the performance economy, to the emotional marketplace. So the system fights back, it shames, it distorts, it calls clarity creepy, it calls simplicity sad, outdate, but that's projection. That's fear. That's control. Because when men reclaim their time, their peace, they become dangerous. They become unpredictable. They become autonomous. And autonomy is power. So yes, opting out is ethical. It's strategic. It's honest. It's disruptive. And in a world of performance, that's revolutionary. That's clarity. That's control. That's peace. And peace, for a high value man, is priceless. Section 10, the quiet revolution. Let's talk about the shift. Let's talk about the revolution, because this isn't just about escorts. It's about autonomy. It's about bandwidth. It's about reclaiming control in a world of noise. Successful men are opting out quietly, strategically. They're not announcing it. They're not debating it. They're just doing it. They're just choosing peace. And that's powerful. That's disruptive. That's real. Because the dating market, it's loud, it's bloated, it's performative, it's exhausting, it's inefficient. And high value men, they're done. They're not chasing, they're not performing, they're not negotiating, they're reclaiming, they're simplifying, they're choosing clarity. And yes, sometimes that means paying for it, not because they're broken, but because they're awake. Section 11, reclaiming intimacy. Let's talk about intimacy. Let's talk about honesty. Because in a world of performance, honesty is rare. And sometimes the most honest thing in the world is a transaction, is a moment without theater, without ambiguity, without manipulation, without performance, just clarity, just simplicity, just peace. And for a man who's built something, that peace is priceless. That clarity is sacred. So yes, successful men use escorts, not because they're weak, but because they're strategic, because they value their time, their energy, their legacy, and they're done performing, they're done negotiating, they're done chasing illusions. They want something real, or at least something honest. And sometimes honesty has a price tag, and that's okay. That's clarity, that's control. Section 12, closing. So what do the rich and the beautiful have in common? They're both isolated, they're both projected onto, they're both seen as valuable, but not as human. And that creates distance, that creates distortion, that creates a hunger for honesty, for simplicity, for peace, for clarity. And sometimes the only way to find it is to pay for it. Not because it's fake, but because it's clean, because it's not pretending, because it's not performing. And in a world of theater, that's rare. That's revolutionary. That's real. So if you want to understand high value men, understand the cost of connection, understand the price of visibility, understand the hunger for peace, because when everything you do is watched, judged, monetized, intimacy becomes a luxury. And sometimes the only way to reclaim it is to pay for it.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.